Good evening, everybody. Thank you for those who are joining us and those that are still on the way in. Happy Thursday. I'm so excited to join you all today for Nature Forward's Conservation Cafe. Our January Conservation Cafe is DC's environmental progress under attack, a virtual discussion examining how DC's unique lack of statehood and the ongoing attacks on home rule affect our environment and communities. 1 year into the current administration, this critical progress toward a cleaner and more equitable city is under threat from weakened oversight, pro-business agendas, and budget cuts that overshadow community and climate priorities. So today we'll be joined by a great group of panelists and organizations to talk a little bit more about this intersection and how it continues to show up. Okay, just a little bit into our agenda today. So we're going to get started with a little bit of welcome, and then we're going to have a presentation from each of our panelists. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A with questions we've already prepared. And then we'll also open the floor to the audience for some questions as well. And then at the end, we're going to give each of our panelists another moment to just share any final thoughts as well. So again, this is Nature Forward's Conservation Cafe. So although this is a virtual event, we really love if you would participate and interact with us on social media. If you hear something that you didn't know about, or if you want to just share this with people in your communities and your social media communities about this important information related to DC and how also our other everybody in the region, including Maryland and Virginia, can be of support to this work. Just a few announcements and housekeeping. Building Community Power for Data Center Reform, a self-guided 7-session course is now available. So you can scan this QR code if you're interested in learning more about data centers and their impact on the region. Nature Forward is doing some amazing work in Maryland and Virginia. And of course, we know the data centers and our air quality does not have borders. So this is really impacting us all over the region, including DC as well. And another announcement we have, please scan for more information. Nature Forward's sister conference, Naturally Latinos, will be coming up March 26th through 28th, and we're really excited. This year's theme is strengthening communities and ecosystems. So please continue to share that with your networks as well. A really wonderful celebration of those in the Latinx community that are doing amazing work in the environmental space in this region and beyond. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our esteemed panelists. And first we have, in order of how they will appear, Vanessa Batters-Thompson. Vanessa joined DC Appleseed as the executive director in May 2022. She brings more than 20 years of litigation, policy, and advocacy experience, as well as a passion for serving the district community to her role. Prior to joining DC Appleseed, Vanessa worked at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center as the associate director of legal services for individuals and families. In this role, Vanessa spearheaded the launch and directed the Family Assistance Network. Vanessa additionally supervised and provided substantive guidance to the Pro Bono Center Individual Representation Training Program, which won the DC Bar's 2022 Frederick B. Ampson Award. Prior to joining the Pro Bono Center, Vanessa worked for an anti-poverty organization, Bread for the City, providing direct representation to clients and engaging in systemic advocacy regarding child support issues. Vanessa obtained her JD from George Washington University Law School and her BA from American University with a certificate in Women, Policy, and Political Leadership. She currently lives with her husband, daughter, and dog, and during her downtime, she enjoys camping, reading, and growing flowers. And we're so excited to have her join us on this panel discussion today. Next, we have Mr. Steve Saari, is the Deputy Director of Natural Resources Administration with District of Columbia, Department of Energy and Environment. Steve manages a talented, motivated team of over 150 professionals who work hard to protect and restore the district's waterways and fish and wildlife. Steve has an MS in ecology and has been in the watershed restoration field for 20 years. And his projects have won or been in the runners-up for prestigious Best Urban BMP in the Bay Awards, or BUBBAs, 3 times. Steve is also a recipient of the Chesapeake Stormwater Network Stone Roller Award and the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay 2022 Watershed Champion. And carrying titles like that, Steve will also be able to carry the weight for Department of Energy and Environment, and Mr. Jonathan will not be able to join us this evening. And last, we have Ms. Sebrena Rhodes, which is a leader of Friends of Crummell School and community organizer with Empower DC, working to win restoration of the historic Alexander Crummell School as a community center. She is doing mutual aid, distributing groceries, masks, hand sanitizer, and soap, which are much needed staple items during the pandemic. In her neighborhood of Ivy City, Sebrena helped Empower DC and Friends of Crummell open the Ivy City Clubhouse. She coordinates the meal program, academic support, and various programs for the youth in her community. In 2020, Sebrena was elected ANC 5D01. Sebrena is a DC native born and raised in the Deanwood community and mother of 6. She serves on the Community Advisory Board for Unity Healthcare and worked for 11 years as an early Head Start teacher with AAS degree in early childhood education. Sebrena is passionate about her children's lives and her friends and neighbors, standing up for her rights and having a voice and being heard and making sure her children are empowered and informed. And so thank you all for joining us this evening. And I'm just so delighted to be able to share this conversation with so many people. And I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamoni. I am delighted to be here tonight with Nature Forward and my esteemed co-panelists. It's great to be here as a group to talk about this really important issue. Just real quick, as Jamoni said, I am the executive director of the DC Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. Our mission is to make the district a better place to live and work, and we do that through law, policy, and collaboration. Among other things, DC Appleseed seeks to ensure full democratic representation for the residents of the District of Columbia, and we've been deeply involved in efforts to ensure that DC is protected during this period where we're seeing what I would call heightened attacks on home rule. I will also note that DC Appleseed has long worked in the environmental space, and our core project, which we've been involved in for more than 20 years, is the Anacostia River restoration. So I come to this with 2 interests in the subject matter, and I'm delighted to be here. Next slide, please. So my task tonight was to briefly talk about the Home Rule Act and how the Home Rule Act sort of intersects with environmental work and environmental progress within the district. And when we first started talking about this topic, there was sort of a sense among the group that often our fights within DC around environmental issues are around the budget. And often that some of the biggest challenges we face in advancing environmental legislation, environmental progress, is really around having the resources to do so. And one of my goals for tonight is really to talk with this group about how DC's budget process and the Home Rule Act intersect. So I've got in front of me some of the language from the Home Rule Act. And for those of you who don't know what the Home Rule Act is, you're not alone. It's a often misunderstood concept. A lot of people think they know what it is, but don't really know the ins and outs of the subject. So I'm going to give you a really quick history lesson. Congress has plenary authority over DC under the District Clause of the Constitution. The District of Columbia, as you may know, was originally established back in 1790, and the Constitution does give Congress exclusive jurisdiction over DC. And at different times in our history, our form of government has looked different. But since 1972, we have had something called the Home Rule Act. It's important to know that the Home Rule Act was passed as an alternative to giving DC full statehood. And I often refer to it as partial democracy or conditional democracy. But if there's one thing that you take away from my message tonight, it's that it's not full democracy. So next slide, please, Jamoni. What you need to know about the Home Rule Act is it permits the district some rights to self-governance. For example, the Home Rule Act permits DC residents to elect a mayor to administer the city. It also permits the mayor to create agencies and boards. So in some ways, at first blush, you look at this and you're like, that's great. The Home Rule Act permits DC to have agencies like the Department of Energy and Environment, which have in very many ways led the charge on environmental progress in DC. DC residents under the Home Rule Act are also permitted to elect a maximum of 13 council members to legislate. But it's important to know that there's specific requirements for the political makeup of the council. No more than 2 of the 4 at-large council members, excluding the seat held by the council chairperson, can be from the same majority political party. If you've ever wondered why we have 2 independent at-large DC council members, that is why. We have a limitation on how many members of one party can serve as at-large council members under the Home Rule Act. Next slide, please. So while there are some positive aspects to the Home Rule Act, there are also very significant limitations on DC contained within the Home Rule Act, and I want to talk about those now. First, any law passed in DC has to go through a congressional review period before going into effect. What that essentially means is that Congress gets to look at DC's laws before they become permanent laws in DC. We do have the ability to pass emergency laws on a short-term basis, but for permanent legislation, it goes through a period of review by Congress. That's 30 days for most civil legislation. It's 60 legislative days for criminal justice legislation. And one thing that I want to highlight is when we say legislative days, that's different from calendar days. It does not include holidays, it does not include weekends, and it doesn't include any date in which Congress is not in session in either chamber when they're adjourned. And that may not sound like a huge difference, but you have to remember that we do have government shutdowns. And what the legislative day requirement means is no new DC laws can go into effect when the federal government is shut down. So I also want to talk about the restrictions in the Home Rule Act that prevent the council from enacting laws in certain areas. One of the most common restrictions, or one of the restrictions you hear about frequently in DC, is the Height Act. We cannot build anything over the federally mandated Height Act limit. Similarly, we can't change the composition or the jurisdiction of our courts. Some of the restrictions that most directly impact environmental justice in DC actually have to do are actually prohibitions on collecting certain types of revenue. So in DC, we cannot impose a tax on a property owned by the US government or the government of a state. If you think about DC, some of our most prime property in the city is owned by federal government buildings. And that restriction on how we collect revenues does impact our overall revenue very significantly. Similarly, DC cannot impose a tax on individuals who work in the district but live elsewhere. So that's called a commuter tax. You'll often hear people talk about DC's bar on the commuter tax. If you look at New York City, for example, they have a lot of people working in New York City who come in from New Jersey, they come in from Connecticut, but New York City taxes all those individuals. So they still benefit in terms of revenues from out-of-state workers working in their jurisdiction. And DC cannot do that, which again, significantly limits our revenues. Next slide, please. So while restrictions on revenues are one of the impacts on DC as an entity under the Home Rule Act, it's far from the only impact. In addition to limiting our revenue sources, Congress actually retains significant authority over the district's budget. Among other restrictions, one of the ones that we feel most acutely, particularly in years where DC is struggling with revenues, is the requirement that DC ensure its annual operating budget is balanced against projected revenues. So when we get into these very intense seasons of budget negotiations and budget debates, the reason those debates are so acute is not just that our revenues are reduced or that there's more demand. It's this requirement that DC has that it must balance its budget each and every year. And so, like in Maryland, for example, if they're having a particularly lean year on revenues, they can elect to run a deficit for a year, or they can elect to borrow money. DC doesn't have that luxury. We have to look to the projected revenues from the chief financial officer, and our operating budget must be balanced before we submit it. And that's why sometimes when we get into the budget season, the budget oversight hearings, it often feels a little bit like a zero-sum equation, right? Where if we add to one budget, we have to remove from the other. And it's this provision in the Home Rule Act, as well as the Federal Anti-Deficiency Act and the DC Anti-Deficiency Act, that really makes our local budget season so intense, particularly when combined with those drops or restrictions in revenues that I mentioned on the previous slide. I also want to note that DC's operating budget is now approved, or DC's operating budget has always been approved by Congress. It's now done through a slightly different process. Since DC enacted something called the Local Budget Autonomy Amendment Act of 2012, the DC government puts together its own local operating budget, but it's still subject to review by Congress. And last year, we really saw the downside of congressional review and congressional control. Many of you may remember that part the way through DC's fiscal year 2025, we were forced by Congress to revert to fiscal year 2024. And that was due to Congress's sort of control over the budget, as well as the Federal Anti-Deficiency Act, which prevents federal government entities, including DC's government, from spending money that has not been appropriated by Congress. So I think in the past, it perhaps felt less clear why the home rule restrictions on DC's budget can be so destabilizing. But coming out of last year, I don't think I need to explain to you as clearly how the idea that Congress retains control and can effectively stop DC from spending its own locally collected tax dollars can be so chaotic for our budget discussions and our local government. I will also note, in part because this has been a big topic in the last week, Congress often exerts control over DC through the federal budget appropriations process. So we in DC often see budget riders on the federal budget, which restrict conduct in DC. Historically, a lot of those budget riders have been around things like public health. There's restrictions on spending for women's health care in DC. In the past, we've been barred from spending our own locally collected tax dollars on syringe access programs as a way of reducing HIV transmission. The cannabis gray market in DC is very closely related to federal budget riders, because while DC decriminalized cannabis, at the federal level, we've been blocked from spending money to tax or regulate cannabis. I will note that generally speaking, environmental issues have not been in that list of federal budget riders. But last year, we did see at least one of them that would have restricted DC's ability to file lawsuits. So as we move on, and as you hear from Steve Saari and Sebrena Rhodes about some of the challenges they see coming down the pike, it's important to know how home rule fits into that space, as well as how home rule impacts things like how we negotiate our local budget and the expenditure of our local tax dollars. Next slide. I think we're on Steve. Yeah, thank you. And that's my info if anyone has questions.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. We're going to pass it over to Steve to give a little bit more of a perspective from the Department of Energy and Environment. We can talk a little bit more about the impact of those budgetary restraints that Vanessa spoke about, and then we're going to pass it over to Ms. Sebrena to share a little bit more of that community perspective for us.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Steve Saari. I'm Deputy Director for Natural Resources Administration in the Department of Energy and Environment. I'm going to focus my comments not so much on our agency as a whole, but on one aspect and a major aspect of the work that the Natural Resources Administration, which is the group that I manage, works on, which is working on water pollution issues in the District of Columbia, which obviously impact the health of our waterways and the health of the fish and wildlife that use it, and all the residents and visitors who come and see our beautiful Potomac and Anacostia rivers. So go ahead, next slide. So I wanted to start with a primer, and I know I looked through the folks online. I can see there are a lot of people that know this stuff, but I just want to level set for everyone where we're at and how we got to where we are. As was mentioned earlier, DC was established in 1790. That is roughly 240 years ago. And a lot of the development of this city was done before people really thought about water pollution and what the impacts that development had on our local waterways. Next slide. So we are, working to undo years of impacts that have occurred. And there are four major sources of that impairment. Legacy toxics, a lot of the shipbuilding and other industrial uses along our waterways led to contaminated, the Anacostia River being very contaminated, including landfills along the waterway. There are also, of course, upstream sources. Our waterways come from Maryland for the most part. And so there is pollution coming from those upstream sources. I'm not going to talk too much about those, but I'm going to focus on the two that are in the circle. One is sewage coming from our combined sewer system, or CSO, and the other is stormwater runoff, and that's runoff from impervious surfaces that ends up in our local waterways. Next slide. So that combined sewer system that takes both stormwater runoff and sewage is a type of system that is found in the older parts of the District of Columbia. And that, looking at this map of the district on the right side of your screen, the blue and green blobs are the combined sewer areas of the city. And there is a large project to install tunnels underground that will be able to capture I guess I should back up. Those pipes that take the combined sewer and stormwater flow to our local sewage treatment plant, Blue Plains, but they are not sized to capture large rain events. And during large rain events, you have overflows, combined sewer overflows that discharge raw sewage into our local waterways. And DC Water for a number of years now has been under a consent decree to address this by a combination of green infrastructure in areas that have the green blobs on the screen, and tunnels that will capture a great deal of that flow in both the green blob area and the blue blob areas on the map. One of those tunnels has been completed. That's the Anacostia River Tunnel, and it has been highly successful, capturing in almost all of the sewage that would have ended up in the river since they've been installed. And I don't know the number offhand, but let's say 99% of those flows. And along with that, they are capturing not just the raw sewage that would have discharged there, but a lot of trash and other materials that would have ended up in the waterways is going to Blue Plains and being treated. So we are very much having a cleaner waterway than we had before. The other two areas are the big green blob at the top, the Piney Branch one. That project area is just about to ground break for the construction of the tunnel in that area, and the Potomac River Tunnel will be coming a little bit later down the pike. Next slide. Do we skip one? Oh, no, we didn't. Okay, next slide. So the other aspect of this in that area that is not in the combined sewer system is that stormwater runoff. So if you think about an area being natural forest, a lot of that rain that falls on it like basically goes into the ground. But because of the development in the district, a lot of that area is impervious. We have about 43% impervious area in the district. And on the screen, you can see a 1.2-inch rainstorm. And that's the 90% of rain events in the district are 1.2 inches or less, would discharge 525 million gallons of stormwater to our local waterways. And that water is hot, fast, and dirty. And what it does, it sends pollution down into our waterways, like the picture on your screen of all the bottles in the water. It leads to erosion, like the picture above. And the heat is also a major problem because the fish and wildlife in the river are shocked by that massive change in temperature from the change from the hot water coming off of roadways and going into the relatively cooler streams. Next slide. So that separate storm sewer system is the area in red. That's about 2/3 of the district. And where we have a plan and we're working in for addressing the combined sewer area through the large tunnel project. This area, we estimate that it's going to cost us about $7 billion to build out this area of the city, which was developed prior to having stormwater management controls, with retrofitting it with what we call green infrastructure that helps capture that stormwater on site and infiltrate it close to where it falls, mimicking a natural condition. Annually, we bring in about $13 million in revenue from a stormwater fee that's one of the ways that we pay for doing this type of retrofit work over time. Next slide. So yeah, as I was saying, a lot of this has occurred since the development of the city. What our goal is to turn back that clock and turn the city more over time in terms of stormwater into feeling more like a forested area. It won't look like a forested area. It'll still be homes and businesses and everything, but it will also have these additional green spaces that are absorbing water, cooling off our local climate and greening the city. And we do that through three ways. One, doing direct work ourselves as a city. Two, providing incentives to businesses and residents to undertake work on their own private property. And lastly, regulation. So when a new development is going in or a redevelopment of a property is going in, they have to meet more stringent stormwater regulations to capture more of that runoff than it did prior to the development that's occurring. Next slide. So here are some examples of the direct public investment that we do. On the left, that's a River Smart school. We do stormwater retrofits to capture the runoff from the impervious surfaces, the playgrounds and things like that in the buildings themselves on schools. And we also design that to be an educational facility for the school for the teachers to use. We also do roadway retrofits. We call them, bioretention is another word you might hear for that, that captures that dirty runoff coming from roadway so that it doesn't end up directly in our local waterway. And then, of course, we also do stream restoration work itself. Next slide. We also, as I mentioned, we do have subsidies for the private landowners. We do that through a program called River Smart. We have River Smart Homes. We have River Smart Communities. We used to have a program called River Smart Rooftops that incentivized green roofs. We help pay for tree planting on private property. A lot of incentives to make it very cheap for people to beautify their property while also reducing stormwater to our local waterways. If you take on those type of things, you can get a discount on the stormwater fee that you pay as a property owner in the city. And so that's another incentive, is not just outright paying for it, but also that your fee gets reduced by doing this work as well. And then lastly, we have a stormwater retention credit trading market. And that's something that where private investors can install stormwater practices and then sell those the credits that they generate from that voluntary project to another developer somewhere else that isn't able to meet their goals on their property, so that it helps make it more cost effective to do this work. Next slide. In addition to our stormwater programs, we have other ways of trying to reduce that pollution to our local waterways. We've had, through legislation, a lot of great legislation that has helped us protect our waterways. The Anacostia River, blanking on the name all of a sudden, Protection Act, also more commonly known as the bag law, is what puts a 5-cent fee on bags in the district. That money is then in turn used to fund programs to reduce pollution to our local waterway. So we're taking those funds to directly invest to reduce pollution to our local waterways. We also have bans on styrofoam. We now have a food serviceware law that bans people just giving out food serviceware. You have to ask for that. We have a plastic straw ban in the city, and something called a coal tar ban, which is a substance that's used to treat to lay on the surface of an asphalt driveway or parking lot, and that sends dangerous chemicals to our local waterways at coal tar. So we've banned that product in the District of Columbia. Next slide. Okay, so getting close to the end of the background. I'm sorry you guys are wading through this, but I feel like it's very important for you to understand it. The work that we do is funded through 3 main areas. I've been talking a lot about the fees that we have, that bag fee, the stormwater fee. Those are called special purpose revenue fees. That's a about 45% of the funding that we're utilizing on an annual basis comes from those fees. We also, another about 45% comes from federal grants. We get grants that are come to all jurisdictions, all states across the country, and are set by land area and population. So there's a formulaic grant to that. And we have a number of those that fund the work that we do. Only about 10% of the funding that we get comes from local tax revenues. But that is a crucial 10% for us because that pays for, we have to match a lot of our grants. And it also helps pay for things that can't be paid from these other sources. Next slide. So now we're getting into the meat of what we were asked to present on, but I felt like I needed that context. There's no, beating around the bush on this. We've had a very difficult budget year in FY26. It is shaping up to look like that it will be a difficult budget year in FY27. In FY26, our agency as a whole had a 20% cut from year over year in our budget. But that wasn't evenly distributed across administrations. There were a couple of administrations. The administration that I managed, that Natural Resources Administration, was hit a little bit harder than other ones. And there was another one, the Energy Administration, was also hit pretty hard. So we had to make some very difficult choices about what we were going to do. And our approach was that, one, we wanted to fund personnel. We wanted to protect the resource of the staff that we had because we lost them. That was going to have a longer term impact than the 1 year because it takes a long time to train and replace staff over time. Two, we wanted to make sure that we were meeting our federal grant requirements. That's kind of a requirement. It's a requirement for us to do that. So we don't want to lose that money. That would then put us even in worse shape. Three, we wanted to make sure that we were meeting our grant match obligations. Four, we wanted to make sure that to the degree that we could, that we were going to meet our MS4 permit requirements. And I realized I didn't define that area of the city, that separated sewer system, the 2/3 of the city that I was talking about, that's called the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 for short. And we have a permit issued by the EPA that has very prescriptive things that we have to do, such as a number of acres that we have to retrofit over the life of the permit, which is 5 years, of the District of Columbia, that will retrofit the city with green stormwater infrastructure to reduce that pollution to our local waterways. So we wanted to make sure that we were meeting those permit obligations. And lastly, we needed to fund the basic obligation, the basic things so that we could operate. We needed vehicles so that staff can go out and do the inspection work that they do. And we needed software. We needed Microsoft license so that I could be online with you guys today. Next slide. So with that, we basically had to cut almost anything that wasn't meeting those obligations. In fact, we did not meet all of those things that I laid out. We did our best to do so, but we didn't meet everything that we were required to in those previous slides. Here's a list of the things that programs that we had to completely eliminate for FY26 that are not going on this year. I will note the first one, the Green Infrastructure Maintenance Program. That is something that is written into our MS4 permit that says that we have to maintain our stormwater infrastructure. So this is an example of where in our budget environment, we did not have the budget to meet our some of our basic permit goals. A lot of these other things, though, are things that are very important, but not required for us to meet it. So, for example, the Anacostia River Explorers, boat tours that gets people out on the river. It's very important to show what this resource is, get them out, become advocates for that river. But that's not required anywhere for us to do that. So it was something that we let by the wayside. Um, the trash trap maintenance, we do have rules on making sure that we keep trash out of our rivers, but we are able to meet the amounts that we have to meet without having the grants in place. And we are, in fact, the staff were out today maintaining that we pivoted and are now we're having our own staff go out and maintain these trash traps rather than having the grantees that we had in the past to do that work, which was green jobs for people in the community. And now we're doing it. And I can tell you, my staff came back and said it was really hard and very difficult work, and they want the grantees to come back. And we are very thankful. It's good for us to learn how difficult the jobs of these grantees are. I think I won't go through this entire list, but you can see the type of things that are there. Let's go to the next slide. So in addition, there were also programs that were reduced but not fully eliminated. And here is the list of programs that fall into that area. And I'll highlight a couple. Our River Smart programs that I talked about earlier that incentivize property owners to reduce pollution by taking action on their own properties. We still have that program going. It is much reduced from where it was before. We have basically reduced it to what our federal grant requirements, what we said we would do, but we were doing, 50 to I guess, 65% more in those areas than we are doing now. So it's by half or less that we're doing. And overnight, there's one that it's kind of in the middle, MeWe's. That might sound kind of weird, but that is the one that I want to highlight because that is MeWe is a meaningful watershed education experience. And that is a year-long experience that students are getting where they are learning about the environment. They are going out and they are doing a science project over the course of the year. They also do an overnight experience at a nearby nature center. And it is a very powerful and meaningful experience to these students in the District of Columbia. And that's something that we had to cut back dramatically because of funding. I'm just going to do one more, which is that, one of the things that we're not doing is doing a lot of the work where we would be going out and testing to see the pollution levels. We still have it going on, but not to the degree that we would have in the past. So we have less of an eye out there for the collecting data on the quality of the waters of the District of Columbia. Okay, next slide. Not all bad news. There are a whole bunch of things that we have been able to continue going fully. There are some great programs here. Most of these, they were continued funding either because we had specific line items in the budget for local funds for them. Example of that is the Kingman Island Rangers program, which is a great program that, again, is a local job training program, but also creates a safe and welcoming environment on Kingman Island. If you've never been to Kingman Island, it's adjacent to RFK, and it is a beautiful area that we are working on restoring to make it it's been overgrown with invasive plants over time. We are in the process of restoring the nature and habitat there, and we're going to be designing and installing educational center on the island for kids to be able to go out and use that area. So please go out and check that out. So most of this was done through grants or specific riders or specific items in the budget that provided funding for it. Next slide. There we go. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think I love the transition of how we're flowing through, that foundation that Vanessa set for us, and then really connecting that to the real impact that we're seeing in our budget and our revenue, and getting into a little bit deeper of how this is now going to be impacting our community, um, from home rule to our environmental programs to the actual community and the residents of DC. So I'm now going to pass it over to Ms. Sebrena Rhodes with Empower DC.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, my name is Sabrina Rhodes. I'm the community organizer here in Ivy City. And I've been a community organizer for 5 years with Empower DC, which is a community-based nonprofit organization that started in 2001 here in the Ivy City community. And I'm also the elected official, the ANC commissioner, serving my 3rd term. So it's beautiful. All of it is connected, but it's beautiful working in Ivy City. And I'm a native to the district, so I'm not brand new. Also, this is our vision and mission statement. I won't read it out for the sake of time, but it will be on the slides. But we do have a vision, we do have a mission, and these are our organizational values, which is to honor, build, disrupt, and persist. This is a little bit of our history in Ivy City. The top picture is how the Carmel School, which Empower DC has fought for 20 plus years. This is how it's going to look once it's done. It's slated to open in 2027. The mayor did put $35 million in the budget, and this is going to be a beautiful, net zero building at that, but it's going to be a very beautiful building in the middle of our historic community. The youth organizing and leadership development, that's what we're working on. We're teaching our youth, because Ivy City is an urban heat island and also has toxic pollutants. We're teaching the community and teaching the youth how to monitor our own air. We have scientists, professors, students, and different universities that's been helping us, teaching us what's going on in our community and teaching us the different, the monitors, the language, the scientific facts. So we've been going through that, and we've been learning that. And it doesn't have anything to do with the budget. It's all about everyone working in collaboration with each other, and it's a teaching and learning experience. Our community, Ivy City, is an environmental justice community, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read all of this, but other than environmental justice is the right to a safe and healthy environment where people are protected from disproportionate or excessive environmental and human health risks and hazards. Though all of that, plus the combined chemical and non-chemical stressors, all of those are what we're dealing with. So in a way, we're looking at the budget and making sure that programs can be funded so that we can do the work in our communities, but that's not stopping us from not having toxins in our air or from us not being an overburdened community. Our community is half industrial and half residential, so we are bearing the brunt of what a lot of the communities are going through. Like they have grass and trees and we don't. We're fighting for grass and trees. And so we don't take for granted the fact that that's a fight that we have to go through. And we need the shade. We need the trees. We need the green space. And like Stella put in the chat, we need blue-green infrastructure, like what Steve was talking about, the bioretention areas. We have historic flooding. We have historic heat. Our community gets 10 to 20 degrees hotter. And the trees, the green infrastructure is what will help our community moving forward. Because yes, when it rains and we get those cloudbursts, we get flooding. And one of the projects that happened in our community was the Northeast Boundary Tunnel Project, which they put those big pipes underground to catch all the storm water and the sewer, because we were catching it. We were catching all of those, the historic flooding, and as of like a couple of years ago. So yeah, all of this ties in together, but we're seeing it firsthand every day in our community. Next slide. The Shutdown NEP National Engineering Products is one of our campaigns. As you can see in the first picture, this legacy toxic polluter has been in our community and has been emitting toxic cancer-causing chemicals for over 90 years and is still operating today without a air quality permit. This is one of the reasons why our community is burdened with so many pollutants. This is just one of the reasons. Also, the Ivy City Resiliency Strategy, which we're working with DOEE to make sure that we use one of our parks as a sponge park, not only to plant trees to absorb the air toxins, but to capture all the flooding water. And the bottom picture is just some youth in the community. They're doing their protest to make sure everyone knows that we don't want this polluter in our community, and that we want clean air, clean water, and clean soil. This is another one of our little organizers, and she wants everybody to know that she wants a clean community. And the Ivy City Resiliency Strategy Plan, which I just want to put a plug in, the comment period closes this Monday coming. So if you would like to add a comment on this strategy plan, it's a very large document. We had a chance to help build this document, help design our park, and make sure that we built the park the way we wanted to be built, to make sure that it's a learning, a nature opportunity, sort of it's going to serve two purposes. One, because it's going to be a green space, and two, it's going to collect water, the storm water, and the toxins from the busy streets in our community. Next. And this is our community. This is our community. We had a street party, and this is before we were able to get on the Cromell site, and we was just enjoying our community as we can, with not worrying about the budget, not worrying about programming, not worrying about anything that we can or can't do in a city, but just enjoying our community, enjoying each other, and spending time having a good time in Ivy City. And again, this was before we were able to get on to the Cromell site. This particular picture was after protests. We had like a march, a children's march, during a time when everybody was marching all over the country. And we felt like the children saw what was going on, and we wanted them to do this exact same thing. And we wanted them to tell the city, open up Cromell, fix Cromell, and give us a safe space to play. And they did that, and they enjoyed it. And again, organizing works and longevity wins. And these just some photos from different campaigns and great times that we have with our members and our community. Right here, everything that's on this slide is everything that we're dealing with in Navi City. So if anyone is an urban planner, or we talking about the budget, we're talking about getting folks involved. We're talking about agencies that are supposed to be held accountable for our communities. We shouldn't have to go through this if everyone was doing their job and making sure that our community was safe and our air was clean and we wasn't exposed to the all of this that's in these pictures. Types of advocacy that we do, we testify at hearings because we let all of the council members know exactly what we need, what we want, and what can fit into the budget. We have advocacy days. We go to the Wilson building. We knock on council member doors and we talk to them in our offices and let them know that just hold conversations with them and try to influence the budget. And this is some of our work that we've done. Two communities that are suffering the most is Ivy City, Brentwood, and Eckington, but Ward 5 carries over 50% of the industrial land uses. That's a land use decision issue, and we need to fix that. And we need to make sure that developers and the city are not bringing factories, polluters, industrial, making bad decisions for the residents here in the district. And these are the documents that are the bills that we have in the system. And the last one is the Ivy City Climate Resiliency Strategy. Like I said, that comment period closes on Monday, so you can go into that document, check it out, see what we came up with. It's a collaboration with the residents, Empower DC, DOEE, Moody Graham, and Ramble. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sebrena. And I'm going to circle it back to Vanessa to kind of close us out on some other actions and some things for that people can stay informed about. Whether you're joining from Washington, D.C. or our neighbors in Maryland or Virginia, there are some ways that we can really hone in on how this domino effect from home rule, DC's budget, particularly our environmental programs, which are funded through our budget and for agencies such as Department of Energy and Environment that are keeping our waterways and our parks and all of the intersectional justice pieces of our work that many organizations like Empower DC, Nature Forward, and other organizations that might have been impacted by some of those grants or some of those other programs. This is really a collaborative effort of the work that we do and the environmental progress that we're trying to make in DC. So I'm going to pass it back over to you, Vanessa, before we answer some questions.
Great. Next slide, please. Great. So I just want to talk about two out of a suite of different pieces of legislation in Congress that could really impact the environmental progress in DC. So right now, as I mentioned before, Congress does retain legislative authority over DC, and there is an unusually high number of bills pending in Congress that relate specifically to DC. And I like to put these sort of legislative threats at the federal level into three different categories. One are bills that focus on DC's home rule. These bills would change the literal structure of the Home Rule Act and the rights that DC has to govern itself. Another big category of bills that we're facing a lot of congressional intervention on are criminal justice laws. And the third category of bills I would call local values bills. So, for example, the Local Resident Voting Rights Act, which permits residents of DC who are not documented or do not yet have citizen in the US to vote on local laws. There's also a couple of different bills that relate to DEI. Next slide, please. The two bills that I would encourage the folks on this call to pay the closest attention to are House Bill 5183, which is called the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act, as well as HR 5179, the District of Columbia Attorney General Appointment Reform Act of 2025. So the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act is a funny title. I think most of us who look at this issue, or at least those of us in DC, would not view this act as improving home rule. As I mentioned earlier, right now in DC, most legislation requires 30 legislative days of review by Congress before becoming permanent. This would change that to 60 days, 60 legislative days. So it would extend the amount of time required to pass any law in DC, but in addition to changing the congressional review period for most laws passed in DC, this legislation, if passed at the federal level, would also extend congressional review to agency action. So right now, the Department of Energy and the Environment, for example, can pass a rulemaking or put in place new regulations. And Congress does not have a right to look at that. However, if the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act were to pass, any rulemaking or any regulation issued by a DC agency would be subject to congressional review. And that is not something that has been the case before. And if you are interested in ensuring DC has the autonomy to pass environmentally progressive legislation, this is not something you want to pass in Congress because it will very much limit DC's ability to promptly make laws, and it would extend congressional intervention to our agency actions. The other bill I want to flag would change how DC's Attorney General is appointed or is put in office. So in DC, we currently elect our Attorney General. And as some of you may recall, at one point that was an appointed position, but there was a law passed in DC as well as a voter initiative that changed how we select our Attorney General. The last two Attorney Generals have both been elected, and they've both been champions for the environment. They have pushed environmental lawsuits. They have held polluters accountable. We've seen a lot of progress. In fact, there is now an entire division of the Attorney General in DC that really looks at these environmental issues. And we're a much stronger jurisdiction from an environmental perspective as a result. The legislation pending in Congress, HR 5179, would eliminate elections for DC's Attorney General in favor of that position being appointed by the president without Senate confirmation. Some of you may recognize that we already have a U.S. attorney in D.C. who prosecutes most adult crimes, and that individual is already appointed by the president with Senate confirmation. This would go one step further. Essentially, the president would just select who he wanted to be the attorney general for D.C., and that person would become our chief legal officer. I will note that there is not a single jurisdiction, state or territory of the U.S. that has their chief legal officer selected in that manner. So it would really set back DC's, it would take DC a step back in terms of having a chief legal officer who can advocate for environmental causes and the natural environment in DC. So I will note that those of you who live in DC do not have congressional representative. We do have a delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who we often refer to as a representative, but she's a non-voting representative. And so we actually don't have a voice in these two pieces of legislation up on Congress. However, I understand some of you here tonight are from Maryland, from Virginia. You have voting representation in Congress. And so I would encourage any of you that do have a voting representative in Congress to let them know that you care about this and that you do not want to see either of these two pieces of legislation pass, because they will really step back DC's ability to function as a jurisdiction on these environmental issues. And that is it for me.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that overview and really highlighting those really important pieces of legislation that is going to impact DC. Yet we see that, you know, us as a city, as a jurisdiction, does not have that authority to really give input on these issues that are going to impact us. And it's something that has been happening for decades. And that is why DC's autonomy is super important, and really why I wanted to shed light on this issue. All the way through this presentation, I realized I never introduced myself. I am Jamoni Overby, and I serve as the DC Conservation Advocate with Nature Forward. And I've been focusing on a lot of environmental issues and intersectional justice issues in DC, all over the city, but also our advocacy and outreach programs which have been primarily in Wards 7 and 8. One of those programs were Community Stormwater Solutions, were also funded by some of the programs that Steve shared, as well as our Green Kids Meaningful Watershed Education program. So not only is the budget and home rule and this lack of autonomy impacting residents, but it's impacting a lot of our organizations that are doing the work and trying to make a difference and working in tandem with agencies that are doing amazing things. So please raise your voice in whichever way that you see fit, and get connected with any of us. And we will make sure that you have our contact information and continue to learn more about and engage on these issues. I was really excited that this was going to be a regional effort. This conversation was really important, not only for DC, but for honestly the whole country. People often see DC as a place where we visit, where it's tourism, where we have a lot of fun, but they often forget that it is home to over 700,000 residents who do not have the voice to stand up like people in other jurisdictions do. And so it's super important now, more than ever, for our neighbors all over the country, and particularly our partners in DC and our partners in Maryland, Virginia, to raise their voice and see what is and decide what is best. Okay. And so I'm going to I think we have time for like a question. I do see that there's been some chatter in the chat box already, but I did want to open up a question to all of you. And then then I'll have some more announcements, and we will probably have some final thoughts so we can get out of here by 8:30. But I wanted to ask, how do these governance challenges intersect with issues like housing, public health, and racial equity? Vanessa, I think you shared some of those already, as well as Ms. Sebrena, but if you wanted to kind of go a little bit more in depth, because we're hearing about the communities that are impacted in some of that work and what is happening, but just kind of seeing how that, playing more into that intersectional piece of how that is impacting not only our environment, but other parts.
Yeah, I mean, I think DC autonomy, one of the things that I always flag for everyone about home rule and DC autonomy is you really can't separate it from issues of race, right? DC as a jurisdiction got home rule versus statehood, in part because of concerns of giving sort of leadership or autonomy to the city's first majority minority jurisdiction or urban area. And that's it is inextricable, the fight for DC autonomy versus the fight for racial justice. And so I think race is a through line through all of the things you've talked about, right? Environmental justice, health justice, housing justice. These aren't things that happen by mistake. They are the fallout of intentional policy decisions that that sort of intentionally disfavored some communities over others. So I think you have to look at them from an intersectional lens because they're all coming from the same place.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as we're kind of coming to a close before some final announcements, I want each of you to share maybe what is one policy DC must protect this year, one myth about home rule or environmental power, or one action residents can take immediately, and that can be residents wherever. And any final thoughts or input or insight that you might want to share?
Well, I'll start. What Vanessa said hits home because those policies, those racist policies and decisions that are still in place now, we're dealing with it here in Ivy City. We're dealing with it in Ward 5 because of the dynamics of our communities, especially Wards 5, 7, and 8. They seem to just either ignore us or dump stuff in our communities, especially in Ward 5. And dump stuff here that they won't put in other wards. So just be mindful that that still happens. And also, like you said earlier, DC has communities. A lot of people think DC is just the White House, the Capitol, and the monument. No, we have people that have been living here all their lives. And there are several communities. And yes, we're going through a lot of things that a lot of communities are going through across the country, like environmental justice or like being a sacrifice zone.
I can go next. I would say one thing that I just really want to make sure we don't lose or isn't delayed or rolled back is actually the restoration of the Anacostia River. And I talked about DC Appleseed's work on that. But, it's where we're getting to the point where like the actual work on the Anacostia River sediment project is slated to start. We want to see that happen, and we want to see it happen in the best possible way. And the reality is that, as wonderful as our local Department of Energy and Environment is, Steve, shameless plug, they can't do it alone. It is a multi-jurisdictional project, and it is a restoration that isn't just one project. It's many projects happening in concert. I don't think the highest priority of the current presidential administration. And so I feel very strongly that we need to stay on that, ensure that the restoration of the Anacostia River is moving forward, and that we're moving the communities that for many years couldn't swim, fish, and increasingly can't boat on those rivers are able to, again, enjoy the river in a condition closer to it where it was when we sort of started to populate this area.
I don't think I could have said it any better than what Vanessa said. I will say I want to spend some time just saying thank you to people like Sebrena and those of you who are on the call who volunteer your time to do this. I get paid to do this work. I am very lucky and blessed that I get to do this every day for a living, and it's wonderful but I rely on the people such as yourselves who care enough to spend your time and volunteer to do this work. So I commend you for that. You are the backbone of it. We are, 500 people in our agency, and we rely on the thousands of district residents and visitors to tell us, because we can't be everywhere, what needs to be done, where you're seeing pollution that's occurring. And I thank you all for that. If there were something that I would encourage folks to do this year, it's turn out like you did last year during the budget season. Pay attention to the district's budget and weigh in to ensure that the environmental progress that we've made over time isn't rolled back. And it is so heartening to the people that work for the city to see the hours of testimony that went on to try and protect the district's waterways and other aspects to make the city a cleaner, more livable, healthier, cooler city for all of us. So please do that again.
Thank you all so much. I think as we come to a close, I really just want to say thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and insight on these issues and really how they're really interconnected. I think I started writing about DC and home rule and its relationship with the environment back when there was a lot of chaos going on earlier in the nation's capital. And sometimes it's hard for us to see those connections of how it's really a trickle-down effect of how not only our environment is being impacted, but real people and real organizations and real communities are being impacted. So I'm really happy that we were able to provide this space of education for people to learn more about how these are connected. And if you know that the environment is connected to DC's budget, you know that a lot of other social issues are connected to DC's budget and that relationship that we have with home rule. So I hope this ignites something within you one way or another. And I'm just going to share my screen one more time because we want to we already continue to do conservation cafes and hosting events like this, both virtually and in person with Nature Forward. But please take the time and tell us how we did. You can provide feedback by scanning that QR code. That title is incorrect, but the link is correct. So provide us feedback on this conservation cafe. We're also going to drop some links in the chat. You can feel free to donate to support conservation's advocacy, outreach, and education work. And then looking at some of our past conservation cafes, please tap into those as well. We've had some really great speakers and really informative conversations on all things environment in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And last but not least, I wanted to give our contact information for all of the Nature Forward's conservation advocates and our Director of Conservation. So if you have any questions related or comments related to DC, Maryland, Virginia, or just how you might want to get involved, maybe you learned something today and you want to take action, be sure to sign up for Nature Forward's action alerts. And please be on the lookout for this recording. And I hope you share it with a friend and a friend shares it with a friend to learn more about this work. So again, please take the time to provide us feedback. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful Thursday and great MLK weekend.